This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello Rebels, and welcome to episode 63 of the Rebel Author Podcast. This week I'm talking to Michael LaRonn, and we'll be discussing tips and tricks to help you get your finished book to publication the indie author way. First to last week's question, and I will make an apology right here and now that I did not post it on Instagram, and I had intended to because I got such great engagement last week with the question. But I'll explain why I didn't post it on Instagram when I get to my personal update thing. So in the Facebook group then, and that's something to say, if you guys are listening and you are not part of the Rebel Author Facebook group, then why not come over and join? I always post the question of the week in the Facebook group, and there is like over 1,000, I think it's over 1,100 now, other authors, indie authors, published and unpublished, six-figure authors in there, so there's always somebody to answer your publishing questions if you have them. I will drop a link to the Facebook group in the show notes. Alright, so last week's question was, what do you care most about in a book? Is it story, characters, presentation, something else? Bobby Ann Atwood said, for me, the most important part of a book is the characters. They have to be relatable, and the dialogue has to be natural to where the character is in their life or journey, as well as natural to their personality. A variety of characters is also important, not just skin colour, romantic orientation or gender, but also personality, motive and purpose. Not every character's goal should be the same as the protagonist, and not every character should act like a stoic and brave survivor with a chip on their shoulder who still somehow finds a way to laugh and show kindness to those around them. More characters than just the villain can be an arsehole, and it's okay if one of the characters is a bit of a chicken. I love that because Bobby pulled on so many tropes that I see in young adult, so I did have a bit of a giggle to myself whilst I was reading that, so thank you Bobby for your comment. Annie said, I would say it's the characters that matter most to me, whether I love them or hate them. If the character is done well, then the story falls into place with them. I definitely agree. I always think it's a bit of a, odd question, because you can't really have a good story without a good plot, and you can't have a good story without good characters. So I do think that they both matter. I think everything matters in a story. For me, the prose definitely matters, of course. That's why I wrote a book on prose. Duh. We all have different parts of story that we favour and that we like best. But to make a good book, I think we're probably all agreed that you need all of the elements. Val Neal agreed and said characters. I think it really is the whole package though. Yeah, exactly. So Val, I completely agree. It is the whole package. Val continued to say, by the way, props to Macmillan for working in 2 Princess Bride references in a single interview. It almost makes me want to re-listen and see if I missed more. Alright, so this week's question is, what self-publishing question haven't you had answered? Maybe you've got a burning question that you can't find the answer to, maybe you've searched forums, maybe you've asked before and not had a satisfactory answer. Let me know, basically, let me know what self-publishing questions you haven't had answered, and maybe I can do like a bonus mini episode and answer them or something. We'll see. Maybe it'll be a Christmas present. So the book recommendation of the week is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Okay, so once again, I'm giving you a fiction book. I know, I'm supposed to be giving you non-fiction. Actually, who says I'm supposed to be? Fuck that, fuck the rules. I'm going to give you whatever book recommendation I want to give you. Why am I talking about this book? Well, in November, I seem to have binge read double what I normally read. And so I have started to read quite a lot more fiction. I spent a lot of this year reading non-fiction, and I just needed to saturate myself in fiction at the moment. So that's why I'm recommending this book. Well, that isn't why I'm recommending this book. I'm recommending this book because it's amazing, because it gripped me and I could not put the book down. I literally read it in a day, I think. I think I did. I read it in a 24-hour period. I mean, I slept. Obviously, I didn't stay up until 6 o'clock in the morning reading it, but I could have done. I text my friends whilst I was reading it, this is one of those books that I really could stay up until 5 o'clock in the morning trying to read it. So it opens and the character voice is really voicey. It's very powerful. So I want to caveat this. This book does have trigger warnings. So if trigger warnings, I would say, include domestic violence of a variety, definitely abuse. I think there's one attempted rape scene in there as well. The person, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I'm just saying there are triggers, and so if anything like that would trigger you, then I don't recommend you read this book. But if those things won't trigger you, then I highly recommend it, because I enjoyed it because it was such a lesson to me in character voice and characterization, and it was incredibly pacey. It was contemporary. It was a romance story, kind of a romance story, and I've just never read anything like it. I think it was classed as new adult, sorry, although the character was 24, I believe, and it just had a fantastic ending, and the protagonist was really strong, and I loved it. I loved it so much that I now have 3 other Colleen Hoover books in my Amazon basket at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to put links to the book in the show notes, and if you want a lesson in characterization in a contemporary setting, I highly recommend this book. Anyway, I'm going to move on because I've been talking about this book for ages. Suffice to say, I really enjoyed it. All right, so personal update. This week has been an absolute fucking train wreck for me. So somebody in my family got COVID and we had contact with them, which meant we had to isolate, which meant my son had to be off school again, last minute with no prior warning. So I had no chance to prep or to, get rid of some work and lessen what's on my plate. And I basically got so stressed that I put my back out, I put my neck out, I gave myself, I don't think it was a migraine, because I think migraines you have to lose some vision. I think you get spots in your vision. Anyway, I had such a severe headache that I was dizzy, I broke out into a fever, and so we were actually worried that I might have caught COVID from my family member, but I haven't. But what did happen was that I was basically taken out and I had to go and lie down. I'm not very good at lying down or not doing anything in a very dark room for quite some time. I basically couldn't do anything for an entire day because I was in that much pain. And it's very much symptomatic of me. When I get stressed, my back and neck go anyway. So I have a chiropractor on speed dial. They know us well. And he will just realign me and the headaches stop. And usually I get de-stressed because all my back is realigned. Suffice to say, I have not ever been in a position where I have been taken out like that. And I've been so unable to work, even though I wanted to. I also felt like I had a black hole where my creativity is. Now, some people would call that burnout. Some people would say it's exhaustion. I think it's probably a mixture of the two. I don't think the burnout is because of my normal working pace, because I have always worked like a fury. That is just who I am. I think it is symptomatic of this year. I think there are a lot of people out there who are exhausted. I think the world is exhausted right now. So I definitely think it is a symptom of this year. And the fact that I've moved house and renovated. What are you saying, Sasha? Jesus, I need more coffee. We've renovated our house and we've had no holiday. I do not remember the last day off I had where I actually well, yes, okay, I had a day off this week, but it's because I was put on my ass by my body rebelling against me. What a bastard. Anyway, well, what was I saying? Yeah, so basically, I want to just speak to anybody who's feeling exhausted and say you are not alone, and that, yeah, that's it really. Just to say, anybody who has found their creativity suffering, I think I said to one of my friends that I felt like the hollowed out arsehole of Satan this week. Like, that's what my creativity felt like. There was just a black hole where it should be, and I haven't really ever experienced that. So I am going to take some time to refill my well, and I will be off social media for a bit, and I will be reading more, watching more, just for the next week or so, until I feel like that itch of creativity coming back. Like, it is there. I've already had some, for the last 2 days I've basically not worked, and I've had some ideas coming back to me. But yeah, it was frightening to be put in that position, because I've never not been able to work at 1,000 miles per hour. So yeah, that was my week. Hope you had a better one than me. What else can I tell you? No, I think that's it. All right, let's move on to a Rebel of the Week. Rebel of the Week this week is Nix M. Cavalier. 2 years ago, I was a student at a translation school. My English teachers, we had 4, for writing, reading, speaking and listening, had already noticed me because as an autist writer, I don't blend well with my peers. We had a listening exam and I had finished first, but couldn't leave because the others needed quiet. So I took my outline sheet and started writing, in English, a very quick fan fiction about Naruto, 2 Naruto characters, Zabuza and Haku? I hope I've said those correctly. Nothing naughty. I just wrote how Zabuzu realised he wasn't just a weapon and was distraught by his students' death. I called it By Revenge and Peace and finished it just before we could leave the classroom. Before I could say or do anything, the teacher took our copies, including my outline sheet with the fanfiction on it. I was a bit sad because I'd hoped I could type it and post it on A03, but I let it go. 2 days later, I received an email from my writing teacher, who wasn't even there that day. She said the listening teacher had given her the sheet and she had read it. She'd quite liked it, even though she didn't know the characters, and was sending me a scan of my text so I could have it back. After that, she started reading my real fanfiction, a very long 800,000 word, very intense retelling of the entire Naruto story. Apparently, she just started reading my original work too last week, and she still likes what I do. All that just because I couldn't sit still and without writing for 20 minutes. I think that is awesome. I love that you were cheeky in your exam. I've often done cheeky things in exams. I've never cheated. I would just like to clarify that. But I have often done things like that. Also in, like, when I used to work in the corporate world, and we had, I remember one particular course, we had some course, God knows what it was, some corporate bullshit. And I sat there writing a story in minuscule handwriting, so nobody could see that I was writing a story instead of writing notes. And I remember one of the teachers came up to me and was like, "Cool, you're really writing a lot of notes, aren't you, about the class?" And I was like, yeah, sure I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. Not. Oh, yeah, so I love this story. Thank you so much for sending it in. And yes, listeners, I really, really, really do need more Rebel stories. We are starting to run low again. So if you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, big, small, or something in between. You can email your Rebel story to rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com or tweet me at rebelauthorpod. One new patron this week, a big, huge thank you to Janelle Hardacre. I am super, super grateful for your support, and Janelle has come and joined the Slack group. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And a huge thank you to all of my old and new patrons alike. You guys help to keep the podcast running, and you also chip some coal off of my cold dead heart. So thank you. And I will be giving you guys an extra article bonus thing this month. I was going to do it this week, but obviously I got taken out by my fucking body. So cheers, body. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes as well as bonus content, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Another big thank you to Pro Writing Aid this week, who are the sponsors of this episode. For those that don't know, Pro Writing Aid is an editing software, and as far as I'm concerned, it's fan-fucking-tastic. I use it personally as both my last line of defense and as a grammar checker, style editor, and writing mentor before I ship off my manuscripts to my editor. Pro Writing Aid is about more than just finding grammar mistakes though. It also helps you to learn good writing techniques. It has 20 different writing reports that make suggestions and then offer detailed explanations as to why they are making those suggestions. Pro Writing Aid also has videos and even quizzes to help you understand the reasoning behind the suggestions, so you actually learn from Pro Writing Aid as well as having your manuscript edited, which means next time you write a manuscript, your writing will be cleaner, better and sharper. Writing can be grammatically perfect and still feel awkward and clumsy. Well, Pro Writing Aid searches out elements like repetitiveness, vague wording, sentence length variation, overdependence on adverbs, passive voice, overcomplicated sentence construction, and much more. Of course, Pro Writing Aid will never replace a human editor, but it will help you to do a self-edit on a deeper level so that when you do send off your manuscript to your editor will be able to focus on the meat of your writing and not spend their time fixing basic writing issues. Basically, they will help you then be able to get your manuscript to the best it can be. Do go and check out Pro Writing Aid. I will leave a link in the show notes. And don't forget there is a Rebel discount code, which is Rebel25, where you'll be able to get 25% off the software. That's it. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I am joined by someone special. I'm joined by Michael LaRonn, a team member of mine. Michael is the author of over 50 science fiction and fantasy books and self-help books for writers. He writes from the Great Plains of Iowa and has managed to write while raising a family, working a full-time job, and even attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find his fiction at michaellarron.com and his videos and books for writers at authorlevelup.com. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Sasha. It's great to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction.
No, thank you very much. It's always lovely to have a fellow ally team member come on the podcast. So yeah, I'm still trying to get Orna to come on. She promises me she is coming on. So, okay. So tell everyone a little bit more about you. I didn't know you'd written that many books either. So I'm fascinated to hear a bit more. So yeah, tell everyone about you, your writing journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started as a writer in 2012, and it was after I had a near-death experience, and I realized that life was too short, and so I needed to figure out what it was I was going to do with my life. Up until that point, I was a sometime writer. I didn't really, I wrote some things here and there. I submitted some things to literary magazines. I tried to go the traditional publisher route, and I just remember being in a hospital bed, staring at the wall and asking myself, what am I doing with my life? And this vision of being a writer it just popped into my head. Now, part of it was because I was on morphine hallucinations, I think, but very true story. But I had these visions and I realized this is what I wanted to do. And I swore on that hospital bed that I would become a writer and that I would bend the universe around me to do it. And right around that time was when I found the creative pen, and I started to learn about what it was to be a true self-published writer. I found the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I started walking the path, and I published my first book in 2014. And it's been a really, really crazy journey from me ever since then. So I as you mentioned, I publish over 50 books. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I did it because I tend to, when I jump into things, I tend to just jump into them. I've also started a YouTube channel right around that same time called Author Level Up. And to my surprise, that channel, it's grown really wildly. It's kind of amazing. Like it's one of those things where when you start it, you don't realize, like you think it's going to be a failure, but then it ends up being successful. And that's kind of how it started. And so my journey has always been, I just walk the path. I try to be a good author, try to be a good business person. And the things that end up being most successful are the things that I never planned. And so if you had told me in 2012 that I'd be where I am right now, with a pretty decent sized platform, pretty decent sized sales, a YouTube channel, several podcasts, I would have never have believed it, because when I published my first book, I had no idea what the writing world was going to look like. So that's been my journey in a nutshell so far.
I love that. I love so many things about that. First of all, because I really like in solidarity for the morphine comment, because I was really sick after I gave birth, and I basically hadn't slept for nearly 5 days. So I was completely out of my brain, hysterical, and they basically gave me morphine to put me to sleep for a little while. And I was just delirious. And when I had to have some like sinus surgery a few years ago, and I remember waking up thinking I was have you ever seen the film Me, Myself and Irene with Jim Carrey?
Yes, I have.
So he has like cotton mouth in one of them, where he gets like really dry mouth. When I woke up, I kept talking about Jim Carrey and how I had like this anyway, like I had a little internal giggle because I completely know what you mean. But I also loved what you said about how the things that you didn't expect to take off really did. So when I started writing, I never expected my nonfiction to go anywhere. And my nonfiction is, I mean, that's more or less what's enabled me to leave my job. So I love that. And I feel like that's so true as well. We expect one thing, and actually the universe provides something completely different, but also what we still need, which I love. So just tell me a little bit more about your books, because I had no idea you had that many. So what genres are they in, and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I write science fiction and fantasy, and that's the majority of what I've written. So I've written a number of different subgenres of science fiction and fantasy. So I've written series about androids. I did an android thriller. I have a series called The Last Dragon Lord, which is about a bloodthirsty dragon lord, and it's kind of like this mashup between epic fantasy and urban fantasy.
Oh, wow.
So that's my best. That's one of my better performing series. That's at michaellarron.com/ The Last Dragon Lord, if anyone's interested in that. But I've also done, I've just done so much. I'm kind of in urban fantasy right now. That's kind of where I'm living. So I have a new series. It's called The Good Necromancer, and it's about a necromancer who uses his powers for good. So I've done a lot of different things in the fiction genre. In the nonfiction genre for writers, I've done a couple of books on helping writers write faster and write smarter. So,
I'm gonna write that down.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have a book, and it's one of those. It was one of those things where I had no idea that it would do as well as it did. It's called Be a Writing Machine, and essentially it's how to write better and smarter, how to beat writer's block and be prolific. And I actually wrote that book because in 2018, I never knew my biological father. And in 2018, I had this weird inclination to try to find him. And I found him on Facebook in like 10 minutes, which is kind of really crazy. And he didn't want anything to do with me. And I was really, I wasn't okay for a while after that happened. But I wrote that book as a way to help me cope with how I was feeling. And so the book was really it was purely therapeutic for me. It was like, how do I use writing to help me wrestle with the problems that I have, and it was part autobiography, not really, but part there are biographical parts of it. But then there was just my manifesto of how I write books and how I managed to write over 50 books while balancing a family and law school and full-time job and all that stuff. And the book did way better than I would have ever have imagined.
Yeah, and I will be buying a copy the minute we finish this podcast, because that is literally like the thing that is plaguing me at the moment. Is I'm just not. It's not like I will never be able to write. I don't think. I'm assuming you must have published about 10 books a year because it must be sort of 8 to 10 books a year, something like that. I'm never going to get to that level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I would like to do 3 fiction and like 2 nonfiction a year. But because I do workbooks with my nonfiction, that would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 a year. So, yeah, I mean, even if I published 6 a year, I'd be like thrilled. But yeah, I just can't seem to. And I know half of it's because I'm doing the wrong things and putting my time into the wrong things. But still, I need to know how you write that fast because I need to improve my speed.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested, you can find it at authorlevelup.com/machine. But yeah, you'd be surprised the little things that you can do on a daily basis to be able to improve your word count. Just little things can really make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm really struggling because I'm trying to embrace the parts of me that I know work best. So I know I'm a burst writer. So I know I will never be somebody who can write like 1,000 words a day every day. It just won't happen because life, children. Also, that's not really how my creativity comes to me. Like it will, I will suddenly get very clear in my mind, like 5 scenes, and I will spend 2 days vomiting out, thousands of words, and then there'll be nothing again for a little while. But it's trying to work out how I can be more consistent with that, I suppose. But anyway, this podcast isn't supposed to be about my writing speed. Okay. So you recently launched a book with Ally on the most commonly asked self-publishing questions. But before we delve into that, for anybody who doesn't know what Ally is, and if they've listened to this podcast, they really ought to, but could you give a brief summary about Ally and what they do?
Yes. Well, Ally is a nonprofit association for self-published writers. So if you think about many different trades or many different industries, carpenters have nonprofit associations, the insurance industry has nonprofit associations, and they do things that advocate for the people in their industries. Why don't we have that for writers? So Ally is a nonprofit association for writers, and it's dedicated to ethics and excellence in self-publishing. So providing lots of free resources, free blogs, free podcasts. We publish books on helping writers become the best version of themselves. And it's founded by our fearless leader, Orna Ross. And ultimately, it's about helping writers become the creative directors of their careers. And so everything Ally does is in pursuit of that. And one of the really great things that they do also is providing a watchdog service. So, there are unfortunately some unscrupulous people out there in the industry. And so Ally keeps watch on those services and provides a ratings directory so that if writers ever have questions on, hey, is this publisher legit? Or, hey, is this editor somebody that's had issues in the past? They can look at Ally and use them as a resource. And I'm really just scratching the surface of all the really wonderful things that they do. And you can feel free to jump in and add color to that. But that's Ally in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful summary. The only other major thing that I would add is just the conference, which they run twice a year. And so it's called Self-PubCon or Self-Publishing Conference. And it usually runs in line with 2 of the major book fairs. So London Book Fair, usually either Digital Book World. I think this year it might be Frankfurt. And it's free for a few days. So you can get all of the conference material for completely no money at all, which is fantastic. And then it goes behind like a membership wall. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, and of course I will leave a link in the show notes. It will be an affiliate link, just to be completely honest about that. But hey, I love them, so that's why I'm promoting them.
Exactly. It's just such a great organization, and that's why you and I are a part of it, because
Absolutely.
They do such wonderful things in the community.
Absolutely, they do. Okay, so the book is about the most common self-publishing questions. So what are the 3 most common questions you or Ally get asked? And maybe a brief answer to each of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most common question that we get by far is, how do I market a book? I mean, that's the first question I think that everyone has on their minds. And I've always said that the first answer that comes to mind for me is understanding the difference between marketing and promotion, because that's the foundation. Because a lot of people, they'll try to promote before they market, right? So I want to promote my book, buy my book, buy my book. But if you haven't done that essential work of let's back up a second. Let's make sure that the book has the right cover, has the right description, speaks to the right people, all of that I always refer to it as like an iceberg. Marketing is like an iceberg. Everything under the surface is the marketing, and then everything above the surface is the promotion. So the majority of the time that I recommend that people spend is in the marketing, because if you get that right, it makes the promotion so much easier. So when people ask, well, what's the best way to promote a book? I ask, well, what's the best way to market a book? Because if you can get the marketing right, then the promotion's a lot easier.
Yeah, that I mean, in my head, I suppose I sort of see them, and they're not. This isn't strictly true because all the lines blur, but promotion to me is shorter term and marketing is the longer term, and having a strategy for marketing, and that's not always the case, because like my AMS ads, some of them run for months and months and months. That's obviously not short term, but broadly speaking, that's sort of how I differentiate it in my head.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's well taken. And then I should also mention that the name of the book is 150 Self-Publishing Questions Answered. If anyone is interested, it's basically allies, writing, publishing, and marketing tips that every indie author and poet needs to know. So I should just throw that out there. And you can get the copy of the book at authorlevelup.com/150. So I'll just wanted to throw that out there. The second most common question that we get by far is anything related to ISBNs. So we get a lot of ISBN questions, and they're all over the place. Sometimes do I need, the most common question is, do I need an ISBN or can I use the same ISBN for ebook and my paperback? And the answer to that is no. You have to have a different ISBN per different format. So one of the cool things that Orna and I did in the book is we have everything you wanted to know about ISBNs question or section. So we answer like 30 ISBN questions. It's like rapid fire, and it's kind of a repository of ISBN advice. So if you have those burning ISBN questions, this is a great book for you. So the third most common question I think that we get has to do with creativity. So how can it's a question I often get personally, but also it's a question that we get is, how do I never run out of ideas? Or how do I avoid writer's block? And I've always told people with writer's block, there's three sources of writer's block. And this is my opinion. It's non-scientific. It's just Michael LaRonn's opinion, just based on my degree from the School of Hard Knocks in this area.
Okay.
I've got summa cum laude. I've got the degree to prove it. The first cause of writer's block, I think, has to do with a lack of inspiration. So maybe you need to read more books, or maybe you just need to go off and go somewhere you've never been before. Because if, like right now during the pandemic, absolutely true, because everyone's at home all the time. So putting yourself in a different area and doing something different that you haven't done can be really good for you in improving that inspiration. The second thing is lack of motivation. So how do you continue to get motivated? How do you inspire yourself to sit down every day or to do what it is that you want to do? And then the third, just real quick, is personal circumstances. Sometimes if you're ill, or if you've got a family situation going on, subconsciously you're going to be blocked, and you'll find that when you take care of the issue that you need to take care of, the writer's block tends to go away. And
I love that so much. So the only one I don't suffer with is motivation. I am one of the most motivated people I know, but I definitely have issues with 1 and 2. And I never really realized how much the external inspiration impacted me. But I constantly book interesting and unusual places to go. So I'll take the family to a museum. We went and saw the Tutankhamun exhibition. We go and do tours in abandoned London underground stations. I climb into derelict buildings. I've been to Highgate Cemetery and had a tour there. Like, I'm always booking steam train trips and random stuff like that. And they all work their way into my fiction. And it's funny. It's definitely, I can definitely feel the well being drier than it would normally be. And it's literally because, and also travel. Yeah. Like last year I went to 5 different places and never did I run out of words because of all of and the weird thing is it's not necessarily a direct, you don't go to Edinburgh, for example, and then write a book about Edinburgh. It's these tiny little things that percolate and, osmosis, they sort of work their way into your fiction and stories in a different way. And obviously that might not be the case for everybody listening, but that is the case for me. I will add one more though. And maybe this comes under personal circumstances. The biggest reason for me not to write is exhaustion. Like 9 times out of 10, if I'm blank, it's because I'm absolutely like bone ass exhausted. Yeah. And I am terrible at recognizing tiredness in myself as well.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. And one of the ways, and that's such a great point. I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I do to combat that is sometimes you're going to have days where you just can't write. It's just a fact of life. And one of the things I try to do is, if I have those exhaustion days, can I write just a sentence? Just a sentence, or can I write like 100 words? And I find that if I'm really, really tired and I sit down and try to write a sentence, I can usually write 2. And if I can write 2 sentences, I can write 3. If I can write 3 sentences, I can write 10. And even if I'm super tired at the end of the day, if I've got 100 words to show for it, that's a good day.
I do
over the average of your career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think I'm going to write that down so that I start to do that, because what I tend to do on days like that is work on the other stuff. So the admin, the AMS ads, which are just mind-numbing tasks particularly, but also have to be done. But I like that. I'm going to write that down when you start answering the next question.
Okay. Yeah. And the book, I'll just mention it again, is 150 self-publishing questions.
And I will leave links to it in the show notes, of course, as well. So, okay. What mistakes do a lot of newer authors make when starting out?
I think the first mistake is unrealistic expectations. When I wrote my first book, I thought it was going to make me a millionaire, and that didn't exactly happen. And I just not knowing the journey and the level of hard work that this particular profession requires. It's easy for almost anyone to get started if they have the motivation and the patience to create their first book, but it's a lot harder to stick around. And I've seen a lot of people come and go in the last 8 years. And I really haven't even been around that long, to be honest with you. But I've seen a lot of people come and go, and a lot of it is because of unrealistic expectations. A lot of times it's because they'll write their first book and then they'll keep writing, and then they'll burn out because they don't meet the book. The book doesn't do as well as they think it will do. And then that creates this really weird, well, I've got to write the next book faster and faster. And then that book may not do as well. And so it just creates this death spiral. So I just tell people, don't have any expectations. Just publish the book that you want to publish and just keep experimenting and trying things. And then when something works, learn from that and then just keep optimizing toward.
Yeah, this is one of my bugbears with a lot of the very large Facebook groups. There's always daily a post about another author who's hit 6 figures in X many months. And they are sort of, jointly super inspirational. And these people are always giving all of their tips and insight, and it's wonderful. But it does create this expectation, be it conscious or subconscious. And what they don't always include is the amount of time that it's taken them. And the majority of people actually can't necessarily write, 12 or 15 or 20 books a year. The majority of people will do between 1 and 5 books a year at best. That is just because there are so many life things going on and responsibilities. People have parents to care for, or they have children to care for, and also we just have different writing speeds, and that is okay. But I always feel like those Facebook groups make it not okay for you to be a slower writer, or enjoy the process even. I've forgotten where I was going with this, but yeah, basically what I do like is did you see the article from Written Word Media about author finances?
I did not.
Okay, so basically they looked at what it really takes to become a 6-figure author. And what I liked is that near enough, like 97% of the 6-figure authors had 28 books. Like, guys, 28 books is a lot of fucking books,
Yeah.
That takes a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we need more information like that to show people how long, and even at 28 books, it's not a magical figure. You're not necessarily immediately going to earn 6 figures from 28 books.
I don't earn 6 figures, and I've written 50.
Well, exactly. There you go. But still, yes, I completely agree about the expectations. And, as you were saying at the beginning, quite often it's the thing that you least expect to take off, which is the one that does. So, yeah. So if you could tell new writers one piece of advice that you wish they'd all follow, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say it's 3 parts. In the community, there are so many great people giving advice. Like, that's one of the great things that we have, is advice is given very freely. And there's lots of advice on the internet in general about self-publishing, about the paths you should take. A simple Google search will yield you, I don't know, 300,000 results on how to self-publish a book. You'll get 2,000 or 3,000 YouTube videos. You'll get however many hundreds of podcast suggestions. And so the problem is that you're constantly being bombarded with advice, whether you like it or not. And there's 3 types of advice. There's advice that's meant for you, meaning it's applicable to your situation. There's advice that is not meant for you, meaning it might sound really good, but if you follow it, you're not going to get the same results, or it could be disastrous for you. But the person giving that advice may not necessarily know that's not a good fit for you. And then the third is advice that you're not ready for yet. So there's going to be things you hear where you're like, oh, that's crazy. Why would I ever do that? And then in 5 years, you'll end up doing it. And so learning the difference between those 3 things in our highly noisy information environment that's only getting noisier, I think is an essential skill for any writer to follow and understand, because you just have to know that just because you follow a blogger or an influencer early on in your career, that doesn't mean that their advice is ultimately what's going to be good for you. So just having that filter, I think, is critically important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think looking at the credentials of the people giving the advice, there are a lot of unpublished people giving out publishing advice.
Yeah.
And, that's not to say that they don't have any valuable knowledge, but, it's important to look at their background and how they have developed that knowledge, at least before you swallow it whole and accept it as valid advice.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like taking self-publishing advice from a traditional publisher.
Yeah. Yeah,
It doesn't make sense. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But sometimes people, when you're new, you don't know what you don't know. And when you don't have any reference point, you don't have any context because you never published a book before. Of course, you're going to make that mistake, because it's how you learn. But just being aware of the fact that you don't know what you don't know, it can be very helpful for you.
Absolutely. So I get asked how writers should promote their first book. Like, how should they get those first sales? What tips would you give them?
I would say write the next book. I know it's common cliche advice, but my first book, when I published it, I sold 3 copies. I made $5.79. And I know that number is burned into my brain, because the first person that bought my book was my mom.
Oh,
And
I love your mom.
second person that bought my book was me, because I bought it so I could generate an Amazon sales rank. And then the third person that bought it was my best friend.
Aw.
And that's how it goes when you first start off. And when you only have one book, your range of motion is very limited, because there's not much you can do. Because readers, if you're writing a series, a lot of readers, they've kind of got the George R. Martin, I don't want to get burned kind of thing, because they don't want to wait 7 years between books. So there's some readers out there, myself included, they're only going to read something if it's got a few books in the series, or if it's done. So if you only got one book, that's a significant amount of readers out there that are probably not going to take a chance on you until you've got more published. So publishing the next book, I think, is probably the best marketing advice you can give, because if you've only got one book, your ads aren't going to be nearly as effective either. And especially if you run Amazon ads, they're not going to do very well for you until you've got a few.
Yeah, I love that you know that figure. I know my figure. I forget I think it was about £89 the very first month, but I'm gonna go and look it up, because I know it was around that figure. I think we never forget that first month, because it's simultaneously like the sheer joy of the fact that you have actually sold copies, and also the shock that anyone has brought, your book, but also the horror that, you are not a millionaire yet.
Nowhere near it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go look up that figure now. I think that's hilarious. Okay, for those writers wanting to create a career and a business from their writing, that will enable them to actually leave their day jobs and do this full time, what advice would you give them to help their business foundation? So the strategic advice.
Well, the first piece of strategic advice that I would give is understand what your key strategic priorities will be. So I think the mission statement of pretty much every writer ever is to write books that entertain and or delight people. So that's pretty simple, and your vision of what happens when you do that, whether that be being a full-time writer or just simply being satisfied at the fact that, people are buying your books, everybody has a different path there. But what are the things that you're going to be doing on a daily basis that will drive your business? So for me, I have 5 strategic priorities as a business, as an entrepreneur, as an author business owner. How do I become a world-class content creator? Meaning, how do I create content that is going to hit the mark every time, that's going to be extremely professional and create quality in value for my readers? How do I become a world-class marketer? So how do I master AMS ads? How do I master Facebook ads? How do I become a master at getting people into my gravitational field? How do I become a technology-driven writer? Meaning, how do I master my writing app? How do I use technology to become more efficient and a better version of myself? How to become a data-driven writer, because data is really important in terms of marketing and sales. If you don't know data, you're going to have problems. And that's something that a lot of writers don't think about, because writers and data don't always mix, but it's very, very important if you want to be a business owner. And then how do you become the writer of the future? Because what are the things that you could be doing today that are going to bear fruit for you 5-10 years from now? And for a lot of people, it's just simply the act of writing more books. But if you understand what your strategic priorities are, that's going to help guide your day-to-day actions. Because it's not just about being a writer. Like that's only a part of the equation, and when most people sign up for this, all they want to do is write books, and they don't realize how many different hats that you have to wear. There's the marketing hat, there's the business hat, there's the legal hat, because you got to make sure you're complying with certain things like GDPR. There's all sorts of things that are going to come up. And so having a good strategy is probably the best foundational tip I can give.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned data-driven author. I was like groaning internally, because it's the bit of the business that I hate the most. I do not have a good relationship with data, and but equally, it's always on my like quarterly plan to be better, find a better stats system, find a better method for analyzing, be better at, AMS ads or BookBub ads or whatever. Yeah, and I think it's also a misnomer for the traditional publishing industry, because a lot of people assume that if you go traditional, all you have to do is write books. And that's a lie, people. It's a lie.
Indeed.
There is no way you can come into this business nowadays without having to wear multiple hats. It's just not possible. Another question that I get asked a lot is how to find beta readers or advanced readers. Do you have any tips or advice for building those types of readers?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I did a video recently on beta readers, beta, that depends on how you say it. I did a video on that. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Beta Readers. And you can get that. You can watch it for free at authorlevelup.com/beta readers. But yeah, it's something I've done over the years. I don't use a whole lot of betas anymore, mainly because I like speed to market, meaning I like to be able to write a book and just get it out. So, but I have used them in the past. And I think the biggest tip I can offer to people is, I don't know, this is maybe this is the Rebel Author podcast. Maybe this is a bit of a rebel idea. That is, consider hiring beta readers. Now, a lot of people will find them on Facebook. They'll get them on Goodreads, and it's not always reliable because people have lives. I mean, people have children. I mean, there's just all sorts of things that come up. But might I suggest that paying your beta readers just a little bit could help you get better feedback. One, it's going to attract better readers. Two, they're going to meet their deadlines because a paid beta reader is a beta reader that meets their deadlines. And then three, you can ask more pointed and directed questions. So I did that with my last novel, The Good Necromancer, Book 1, A Shadow Deal. I did that because I wanted to find specifically urban fantasy readers. And I've always had a hard time finding beta readers that actually commit to doing what they say they're going to do. And so I did that, and I found out just by exploring the idea that there's actually people that, I don't know if they make careers out of this, but they certainly make income being paid beta readers, And so just consider that would be my first tip to consider.
Yeah, I've never heard of that or considered it. So I think that's an amazing idea. And I'm excited for that idea, because also it means you can get the feedback in the time that time allocation that you want. I only have one critique partner these days, and she reads everything that I write and I read everything that she writes. And that has I have whittled that down over the years. I used to sort of have 5 or 6, and it was just so overwhelming, and the conflicting advice. And so basically we got to the point, me and her, where she has strengths that I don't have, and I have strengths that she doesn't have, and we write in similar genres, and we understand each other's voice and tone and angle. So but I love that idea. I think that is a great idea. I often hear from writers who are uncomfortable or unsure about creating a mailing list. What advice would you give to help them set theirs up?
Yeah, there are plenty of resources out there to help with the nuts and bolts of the mailing list part, because that's a question I get a lot too, is how do I do it? And the answer is, it's actually not that hard. Just YouTube it. Just the trick, I think, is finding a good mailing list service. And everyone, I use GetResponse.
Okay.
Yeah, I use them. They're maybe not the most popular. Like, people think of MailChimp, or they think of Aweber or MailerLite, but I use GetResponse mainly because I just like their interface, and I like how easy it is to navigate and use. But everybody has their different preferences, So just experiment and figure out which ones seem like they're the best fit for you. And picking the right one is half the battle. That's half the battle. And then I guess the practical tips in terms of what do I do next? Okay, so I've started my mailing list. Now what do I do? I recommend go find like internet marketers. So like whatever interest you have in your everyday life, anytime you get the opportunity to sign up for some mailing lists, you're on a website and they say, hey, join my mailing list to get 10 free tips on blah, blah, blah. Create some like a burner email address. Like, give your personal email out, but create like some burner email address and just sign up for as many of them as you can. And then start paying attention to what they're doing, because internet marketers are masters at email marketing. I mean, I've seen some just wizard stuff come into my inbox over the years. And what you do is when you see something that's like, oh, wow, that got me to click, or that got me to buy, or I totally signed up for that lead magnet because I really liked it. Write that down. And then that becomes part of your toolbox that you can use later. So I have an autoresponder sequence that I use for people that join my fan club at authorlevelup.com/fan club. And I offer, I saw someone do this once and it was just really cool. It's called the Writing Craft Playbook. So I basically, what I did was, it was like an illustrated book of writing craft techniques. And it's kind of told in the perspective of like an American football coach, and it's kind of a fun lead magnet kind of thing. And that gets a lot of people to sign up for my email list. They're having the right lead magnet and then having good autoresponders afterward. You can learn all of that from internet marketers. And so that is my biggest advice.
I have a swipe file, and that's for that exact purpose. Any email or subject line or exactly that. And I just dump them in the swipe file, and every so often I go through looking for inspiration. And it's funny you talk about the writing craft magnet. I am literally in the process of moving mailing list provider, which is why I asked who you're with.
Okay.
I'm with MailChimp, but it's costing me like 70 quid a month. And I'm like, I gotta move provider.
You'll lose an arm and a leg with MailChimp. I mean, they're not bad, but they're expensive.
No. Yeah, they're excellent, but yeah, just bloody expensive. If I go to MailerLite, I half the cost of my mailing list, but I'm going to have a look at GetResponse. So last question before I ask the ultimate question on this podcast. How many words do you write a day? This is me being completely curious and nosy now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do. I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. So like if I'm writing nonfiction, anywhere from 3 to 5. Like I'm writing a book right now where I'm literally getting 3,000 to 5,000 words down every day. Mainly because I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, with fiction, it tends to be less than that. I can have some days with fiction where I can get up to 3 to 5. But with fiction, it's usually between 2 and 3 on most days. With fiction, I tend to write everything in one draft, and I don't go back and edit. So I like to take my time and make sure I get it right the first time. But yeah, but if I'm doing YouTube videos or podcast episodes, there's going to be days of the week where I don't write. So it's not realistic for me to say that I write every single day. But when I'm writing, that's usually the pace that I go.
I bow at your feet. I mean, I tend to get between 2,000 and 3,000 when I'm writing fiction. The problem is getting around the admin. I've just said to sort of one of my accountability partners, I need them to sit me down and look at every task and thing that I'm doing in my day, and tell me what I should cut out, because I'm just not getting the words that I need. But anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say another thing that has helped me, and I tell people this a lot, is I write on my phone.
Do you?
Yeah, so like when I write on my desktop or my laptop, but before all the pandemic stuff happened, my life was just so hectic that I was never at home or, never in front of my computer to be able to write. So I learned how to write on the Scrivener iOS app, and I write on my phone. So like if I'm at the doctor's office or at the grocery store, stand in line, waiting to be seen, I'll just whip out my phone and get a few sentences in. And I did the math on it, and it improved my word counts by 40%.
Shut the fuck up. Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding. Not kidding.
My God.
Yeah, I almost doubled my word counts by doing that. Now, everybody else's results may vary.
Yeah, of course.
But it's amazing how much time you can reclaim.
That's insane.
If you try to do that.
So do they sync the Scrivener app on the phone to the, because I never got it to sync properly.
Yeah, I have it on, I have Scrivener on Mac and I have Scrivener on my iPhone, and it syncs just fine. I know some people have had syncing problems, but it's never been an issue for me.
It's another thing I'm writing down. I brought the Scrivener iOS, but I think when I had an iPad, I don't have an iPad anymore. And I could never get it working properly, but that was quite some time ago. So I wonder if it's updated. And because I brought it so many years ago, it'll still be in my app store. So
do you use Scrivener?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I mean, if you use it for the desktop, then you should be able to get it to work for your phone.
I used to write on my phone when I had a day job, but because now I'm more often than not in front of my computer, my problem is, and I'm really working on this, like I am really trying to be conscious about what my issue is. And I genuinely do the wrong things. And secondly, I am very bad at turning notifications off. And so I know it's a complete indulgence and extremely expensive for what it is, but I am going to buy one of the free writes. I don't know if you know, do you know what the free write is? Yeah,
where it turns off your internet and...
Yeah, well, there's no internet connected to it. The only thing it can connect to the internet is
the
to
device.
Upload. Yeah,
Gotcha.
The device, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I have freedom, I have self-control on my Mac, and it just doesn't, or I'll put it on, and the minute the time expires, boom, 8,000 notifications, and I'm gone for an hour. And interruptions are just poison to me.
They are.
In terms of getting anything done. And obviously, you know, my son's been off school for several months now, which hasn't really helped. But yeah, I'm going to invest in one of the free writer, travel writer. That's what it's called. That's the one I'm going to buy. Just because I think it will help, because I don't necessarily have my phone with me when I'm writing, because I'm on my computer and my messages and my fucking everything's connected to the Mac anyway. Yeah. So yeah, like I'm excited for that, and I'm not in denial. I know you have to change your habits too, but I do think it will help. So yeah. Okay, my favorite question. This is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell us about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
All right. So one of the things that I am a question I'm always asking is, how do you visualize the craft of writing? Because like the biggest problem, I think, because I think you and I have this unique problem, because we write books for writers. Like, it's one thing to write a book for writers, but like, how do you take that and make it tangible? You know, because like think about it like this. If a plumber comes to your house and fix your leaky toilet, you have something at the end of the day. Like, the plumber has tools that they can use. Like, you can see all of that. Like the plumber learns through hands-on experience. You know, somebody else teaches him how to fix a toilet, and so on and so forth. How do we do that as writers? Like, how do you take the tools that we have and visualize them? And so I'm working on a project right now. When is this going to go out?
I will tell you that.
Okay.
It will go out, 1 second. Probably around the middle of October.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad I asked that then. Okay, so the project I'm working on right now is, like, I had this really weird idea to do something totally different. So like, I get a lot of people that ask me, well, where do I start as a writer? Where do I begin? There's so much to learn. I don't know how to wear all these hats. It's just overwhelming information overload. So I decided to do something a little different. I decided, what if I took all of the elements of the writing life, and then I kind of twisted them and turned everything into like this travel guide. So like, I'm writing a book right now called The Indie Author Atlas, and it's your guide to the 7 continents of the writing world. So I basically take all of the different elements that you need to learn, like writing craft and marketing, and I turn them into countries. And it's like an imaginary travel guide, like reading a Lonely Planet book, and I'm actually getting it illustrated. And I have no idea if this is going to work. Like, is this a complete like shot into the dark? But like my subscribers could tell me, well, because I had this idea of like, I had this learning plan. So when I first became a writer, I wrote down all the things that I wanted to learn, and then I went off and learned them. But I don't want to write a book that's just a bunch of bullet points. It could be kind of boring. Oh yeah, learn this and learn that. So I was like, how do I make this sexy? How do I make it fun? And it could be a complete disaster. I have no idea. But I think it's kind of in a rebel thing because I'm trying to push the envelope. So it's called the Indie Author Atlas, and it'll probably be out by October. So if you're listening to this in October, authorlevelup.com/atlas.
That is amazing. I absolutely love the sound of that. And I completely agree. There are so many books for writers that are just so dry. And I just think it is the biggest irony that there is.
I know.
Like, we are writers. We ought to be able to write books that are engaging and interesting. So that is one of my biggest things when I write books for writers, is to make them funny, make them sarcastic, like make them engaging and make learning fun. I think so often learning is made to feel like a chore, and nobody ever learned shit when it was a chore. Like nobody wants to do chores. I love that that's your interpretation of that. I cannot wait to see how this comes out.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, watching an Anthony Bourdain documentary or reading Lonely Planet or something. It's just, it's all completely imaginary, but there's a point and there's a purpose. And I hope that it will be instructive and help you learn what it is you need to learn about being a writer.
That's amazing. And so will it be aimed at beginners, middle ground, advanced?
It'll be aimed at beginners.
Okay.
Because
amazing.
Beginners are the ones that typically ask me for it. They don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And so they want to know all the different things that are out there. And so it's kind of like this guided direction through the world of writing.
Well, let me know when it's coming out, because I definitely am going to read that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will. I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, please do. Tell listeners where they can find out more about you, your books, your podcasts, your YouTube, and of course the Alliance of Independent Authors.
Absolutely. So the best place to find me if you're interested in the fiction that I write is at michaellarron.com. So it's just michaellarron.com. If you're interested in the writing advice that I happen to give, so the YouTube channel and all that stuff that I talked about, Be a Writing Machine, you can find me at authorlevelup.com. That has links to all the things that I'm doing on a daily basis. And then if you're interested in the Alliance of Independent Authors and the book that we've written, you can check that out at authorlevelup.com/150. It's authorlevelup.com/150.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Sasha. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you also to everybody listening, and of course to the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, then you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to Michael LaRonn, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I am super excited by my guest. I am going to be speaking to David J. Peterson. Now, you may not know this name because he's not too much in the indie author sphere. However, David J. Peterson is very famous in his sphere. He is a conlanger. If you don't know what conlanging is, it is constructing a language. So basically, David J. Peterson is an expert at creating new languages, and he has done so for very, very big shows like Game of Thrones. He was the creator of the Dothraki language, and many, many more shows that you have 100% heard of. I don't want to tell you too much about this episode upcoming next week, because you just have to come and listen to it because it is fascinating. I got very obsessed about conlanging, or I had the pleasure of speaking to him, and it's all thanks to one of my patrons. So big shout out to Bear Kloss, and I will say another shout out to you next week. As a thank you, because it was with her encouragement that I even went and interviewed them, or even pitched him in the first place. So yeah, come and join me next week. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.